Okay, now it's time. We've made our crown and we made the moldings. So now it's time to do the face frames. And now you're going to see why we made those moldings before we went to the face frame. Here's the reason. This is that little thin, narrow molding. And it's going to set right over top of our face frame just like so. But we have this, the thickness of this, the back of this molding, that we have to compensate for in our face frame, because if we don't, then our face frame is going to be this much taller by 2 because we've got the bottom molding. So we need to make our face frames a little shorter than the case so that this will set down on top of it and come in level. So what I'm going to do to get that measurement is I'm simply going to set this dead flush at the top of my cabinet, mark it. Now see, the thing of it is with this is far more accurate than trying to do all of this, you know, minute measuring, and something gets off a little bit here, a little bit there. Well, there you are. Then, on this one, which is our upper cabinet, there will be this molding coming along the bottom. So I'm going to mark it as well. Now the crown, once we get our face frame set up, when we start making the dividers that go between it, that's where the crown's going to come into play. Because remember, we said that we wanted an equal distance. We want an equal distance from this molding to the bottom of our door as we do from the top of the door to the bottom of the crown. That gives us a nice balance. A little minor variations isn't going to make a lot of difference. But let's assume for a moment we had an issue and we didn't get this crown to the exact height. We cut it a little too narrow. Or we cut it a little too wide. I can take in the top here, I can adjust the height of the door. You understand what I'm saying? I can adjust the height of the door a little bit because I can make this top a little narrower or a little wider to make up for any differences. So this gives me an out. If I make a mistake, I can get out of trouble. I like those, because I can sure get in trouble easy. And because I can, that's where things like making the moldings first and having them to literally be able to use to know that I've got it right. Now, if you're super good at measuring and math and everything like that, yeah, you can figure it out. So can I. The difference is when we go to literally cutting the wood, if there's the least little mistake or anything's off just the least little bit, we have no way to compensate. This way, we can. We now know. Okay. So I'm going to get everything set out, laid out here. It's going to be our face frames. And we're going to start cutting everything to length. All right. I've got my mark where my face frames, where the molding's going to set. So now I need to get a measurement. And I'm at 35 and 11/16. All right. Now I'm going to go to the top. My line isn't straight there, so it's kind of going downhill, so I guess that was the way I was holding that molding to show you. Let me get this, if I can get this molding flat. I gotta get it. I'm at 40 and 15/16. I got a fat line there. I'm going to check this thing again. You know that measure twice thing? I'm going to hold this dead flush at the top. And 15/16. Okay, I've got everything laid out, and so now what I'm going to do, this is my left side, this is my right, but what I'm going to do is the bottom of this is 35 and 11/16. But when I made my material, it's 80 inches, and I only need about 76, 77 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up here at about 36.5 inches. I'm going to give myself plenty of room to square off them ends to make my first cut. I might as well do the same thing the other side. I don't know, that other side's got a pretty squirrely bottom there. I'm going to go 37. Everything lined up. All right, I'm ready to cut that. So I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to take the chop saw and cut it. I'm going to mark which side of this line I'm going to be cutting on, because that's going to keep my figure all in the same place. This tiger maple, that's what I'm really want to stay focused on. So I'm just going to walk over here to the chop saw and chop it. Okay, everything is cut. Now I'm going to start cutting the top section first. And the reason I am is because it's the longest. You're going to see what I'm talking about. And it is set at 40 and 15/16. But I'm going to be sure. Now I'm coming back over here to this case, and I'm going to stand this up and make sure this is dead on my mark. And it is. But if it had not been, I could have made an adjustment really easy. So now I'm going to cut my length. Right top. Right top. Left top. All right, time to go to the bottom. $35 and 11/16. But I'm going to be sure again. What's that old thing said? I done cut this board 4 times and it's still too short. Well, this one's too long. That's a good thing. Wasn't much, but it was there. That's what I want. Now I have no surprises. Right side, bottom. Right side, bottom. Left side, bottom. All right. Now, what we have to do is we've got to cut some mortises. We've got to cut some mortises for our stretcher across the bottom, our drawer, stretcher across the bottom of the upper case, and our top crown. Okay. Now I'm going to take this storyboard that I've got all laid out, and I want to make sure I've got everything just like it's supposed to be from it. Now, one of the things now I'm going to have to measure this, and the reason I am is that in order so that you could see it, we took some magic markers and went over it to darken it. And the thickness of those lines, I don't want. But that's okay. Probably hidden from the camera. I got a 4.5 inch base, 1 inch space, then my doors, my drawer, space at the top. So I'm going to go through and lay this out, then I'm going to show it to you. All right, guys. Cease, halt, and desist. You got a problem. Now, so look at this. Right dead in the lens. Let me see if you can get this. Can you get down that? It moved. And it moved. You're not going to be able to see it with that dial on there, but it's about 1/8 of an inch. Now, let me tell you what we got to do. First, can I cuss? That ruled out option 1 for me. Now this material is a strong 7/8. It's almost 15/16. I could mill this out. Not say a word to you, mill it out, and everything's perfect, but it's not. But in being Tiger Maple, the other thing I can do when I look at this, I can set a straight edge on it, and I can push down on it, and it takes very little pressure to make it go back straight. That's Tiger Maple when it's really heavily figured. Now, you know what? There's an internal stress in here, but you know what else probably contributed to this? Remember when I was putting the dial on everything? And put the dial on the back of this one. This one had that ugly spot, and I knew I wasn't going to be using the back of it, and I put that water-based dial on there. Maybe wasn't a lot. One side, the other side. So, what am I going to do? Like I said, the simplest thing would be to do for me just to take and put it across the joiner, take it on down to about 3/4, strong 3/4, and move on. But I don't want to do that, because you may run into this yourself. And this has got to be pretty nice. Now, once I get it, this piece is actually, what I was doing, I was laying out for the mortises to show you. But what's going to happen is, and then this side of it, I've got to cut that 22.5 degree on. So it needs to be pretty straight. Now, once I get it into my side and get it glued, and then get it attached to the case, it's not going to move anywhere. Holding wood is a lot easier than moving wood. So what am I going to do? I'm going to show you. All right. If we take a look at this piece, it's sitting flat on the bench, back to right about this point. Can you see that okay? Right here is where it starts to turn and go up. Right in here. Yeah, right about in here. Now here's what I'm going to do. I've got some really hot water I just microwaved. I'm going to clamp this down, and I'm going to put a little stick under it, about an 1/8 inch, and I'm going to reverse clamp it. I ain't supposed to show y'all. I had a friend of mine sent me 500 of these to read my stick. Ah, Sherry, don't get. That's funny. I don't care who you are. All right. Jeez, have a sense of humor. Lighten up. I'm the one got the crooked board. This is hot. You know, we steam bend wood all the time. And we all know water makes wood move. And heat. Now, if this was... The heat's almost as important as the moisture. And this is hot. I'll tell you something else about don't put wood in the microwave unless you really know what you're doing. I ain't going to tell you about that, but I know. All right, right about here. I don't want to get too big of an arc in this. And the other side to it is, if this completely reverses, when I'm cutting it through on that 22.5, I can hold it down to get my edge straight. This way I can't. be contrary. You know, maple bends good. All right. We'll leave that till tomorrow and see what we got. All right, guys, it's the next morning. Ain't you glad I didn't just leave the camera running? And then you'd have got to sit there for, I don't know, a couple, 3 or 4, 5, 6 months and watch wood dry. Not going to do that. This is that piece of wood. Now, one of the things I wound up doing yesterday was I kept an eye on it, and I found out that my little 1/8" paint powder wasn't quite enough. And I actually wound up wetting it with really hot water 3 times. Then I thought about it a minute. Now, yesterday, this piece of wood was actually bowed this way. It was going down. This end was dipped down. So what I did was, I actually put it back in traction. I wet it, and I had to go. So what I did was I took a little 3/8" piece of wood, I put it on this end, and one about right here, because this was my flex point. Soaked it good with really hot water, and I clamped it down this way. Remember yesterday we had it in the middle and going down on each end? I reversed that. Now the reason I reversed that was because I wanted this surface exposed. Now remember when I was telling you, this goes back to that plastic bag and covering it up thing. This surface being exposed to the air is going to dry out faster than the bottom. What happens when wood dries? It shrinks. So the object of the game was we wanted to stretch the fiber on this side, shrink the fiber on that side. Shrink the top, expand the bottom, and it pulls it. Now, if you also remember when we cut this, we laid it up here and it was dead flat. That's when I should have immediately gone and built the face frame. Because once I lock everything in place, it's not going to move. And Tiger Maple, because we've got a grain running up and down it, and then we've got all that curl running across it, it can move. That's indicative of most curly woods. Now curly cherry not so much, because curly cherry has got usually a much broader band in it, and it's denser. I could have taken this and steamed it, and I've seen cases I've had to do that. But think about what I'm telling you. You know, we steam bend wood, so why not bend it back? You know, you can bend it to create a form, but you can also bend it to be straight. Make sense? But Bob Vila don't show you that stuff. You know, this is an expensive log set, and starting over is not an option. And this is not the fault of the people that cut and dried the wood. It's one of those things. It's, you know, it's wood. It has a mind of its own. Now over here, the same pieces off the top of both logs, both boards, which came out of one log, started doing a little bit of the same thing. So I just got them in traction. But what I did do, they weren't near as bad as that. So what I did do is the downside of this, I took my cup with some really hot water and I wiped it. I just want to get that surface damp. Because again, I'm just letting it, that hot water is going to cause the fibers in that wood to soften, and it'll let them expand. With this side of the the board up, it's going to dry more. So we're going to get the exact same result. Now this was just minor, okay, but I need them as straight as possible to glue them in. Now, I overbent this, obviously. And this morning, first thing, I took it out of clamp. And when I did, I actually had a little bit of a hump in it, more than what you see now in reverse of what it was. But I've also learned that it always comes back a little bit. And like I said, as long as I can get this flat, or hold it flat enough to get it through the table saw and get our 22.5 degrees cut on it, once we glue that together and we've got it straight, where the two pieces come together, for that to be able to move, once it's locked in place, it's not going to happen. Now, what's another alternative to this? Well, an alternative is splining it. Now, if you've watched some of my DVDs and you've been out on a regular forum or whatever, we've talked about this. And I may have to do that, and I probably will do that on these doors, just to be sure. And that's a case where what we do is we actually go to the table saw and we'll take like a 1/4 inch dado, and you don't even have to do that. Actually, just one curve. And we just make a cut down through this. Don't cut all the way through. We'd cut it down and leave about, 1/2 inch, 3/8 on this side. Then mill another piece of material that fits perfectly in that curve. Glue it. Coat everything good with glue. Now, in that case, I do like a polyurethane. I really do. And the reason for it is that polyurethane not only holds well, but polyurethane uses moisture to cure. So it will actually pull moisture out of the wood. It uses it as an activator. And so it will make sure that the center of that wood is drier. Sound kind of crazy? Well, maybe so. But if you get in trouble, try it. Or I will use something like a Titebond 3 glue. Why Titebond 3? Titebond 3 dries very hard. And it doesn't have as much moisture in it. But you got to work fast with it, as you well know if you've used it. The yellow glues will glue. Yellow glues, if you notice, when you glue something up, they hold great. But a yellow glue will be a little bit gummy. It's a little bit more elastic. Okay? It's not as rigid as the Titebond 3. Other glues that are rigid are like your white glues. You know, I got news for you. Old Elmer's white glue, used it for years. It's not broke. And the liquid high glue in the bottle, it dries brittle. It dries slow, but it dries. I don't want to use the word brittle. It dries hard. Okay, and that's what we want to create, is a hard, rigid line. All right. So once, and I would still just go just a little bit below, meaning a little bit of an overbend, because I'm going to get a little spring back, not much. And it's, it's kind of a trial and error thing. But the biggest thing I want you to get is that we left this material nice and heavy right up to the last minute before we are committed. Now this wood is already moved, so yeah, as I said, I could go back and remill all of this dead flat, and odds are it would never create an issue. But like I said again, if I do that, then if this was 3/4, I would have nowhere to go. And if you find yourself in a situation you don't have anywhere to go, then you're going to find, then being able to draw back on it and remember some of this may help you a lot. Now, this is another reason I want you to understand This wood did not move until after we cut everything apart, got everything opened up. Okay? What could I have done different? Well, probably what I could have done different would have been to have let it acclimate a little longer. That may have helped. But the same thing applies. When I start cutting these into narrow pieces, I'm opening up these sides as well. And just like that loaf of bread we talked about, now it's drying all the way around, and it can move. There's obviously a stress point somewhere in this wood for some reason. Okay, there's nothing really evident. But each one of those boards, one came off the top of the other, and only the top of it wanted to move a little bit. The bottom case pieces are laying here, and they're dead flat. They haven't moved a bit. So, welcome to the world of wood. It happens. And now you have an idea how to deal with it. Okay, we're going to get on now cutting our mortises. I went back to the storyboard, and this is the upper case. Now, it happens to be on the right side, and it's upside down. But all I did was went through and made sure that I've got my measurements correct. Because the only place I've got to do a mortise is for the top and for the bottom. Now, be careful and keep yourself oriented here. You know, because you're going to have a side, and then you're going to have, this is the face frame. This is going to get an angle cut on it. So make sure you put your mortises on the right side. Now, I laid it out on the case. And this is the upper, and this is the bottom. So I've got my 7/8 molding plus my 1-inch space. So that's 1 inch and 7/8. I actually took the crown and laid it on top of this and made a mark where my crown ends. Then I went 1 inch below that. Now, if that's not perfect with this, that's okay. Because like I told you, we can adjust a little bit with that door top. But we want to try to keep this space and the bottom space the same. Okay, then making sure I was right, all I'm going to do is just take my actual piece of wood and lay it up here and mark where I need my mortise. And I've done the same on the bottom. Now, don't forget that we cut these short to compensate for the molding. So don't expect it to come down here quite to the bottom. Just bear that in mind. Now, I've done the exact same thing with the bottom case. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it. The difference between the bottom case and the top case is that I held my piece of wood flush to the top and went to the bottom, because the bottom's where the little space is cut for the molding. And it's opposite on the bottom case, because the bottom case, the molding will be on top of it. So I done forgot what I was. Make sure I get this right. Yeah, okay. So I want to go to the bottom and lay it out. Now all I'm marking and just to refresh your memory, I've got a 4.5 inch base plus a 1 inch space. At the top, I've got a 1 inch space. Actually, I took the top of the molding, where the molding is going to hit. Now that's the full width of the molding. Don't confuse yourself. Remember that little molding, that molding's got that little notch in it, but this space has got to be the full width, not just the little tongue that's on the molding. So here's my molding where it's going to hit, 1 inch below it. Then I've got a 3 3/4 inch drawer plus a 1/4 of an inch on top and bottom, which is going to be the overlay. That's how much the drawer is going to overlay the case, because that will be our visual reference. See, this is a wide piece, but the visual reference will be from the top of the drawer and bottom of the drawer up and down. So this is actually 3 3/4 plus a half, which is 4 1/4. So I went 4 1/4 from my inch mark down, then from there down another inch. That's going to lay me out exactly as I want to be. And of course, I've now marked for my mortises. Now all I've done so far is just mark the whole thing. Now we'll come back, we'll move, and then we're going to lay this out exactly where we want the mortises to sit. All right? All right. I want to lay out the mortises now. So what I've done is I've taken my left and rights and just simply clamped them together so I can do everything simultaneous. The base. If we look at the picture of this base, you notice it's got a scroll, nice little scroll on it. So with that said, we really don't need the full width of this mortise to cross, because it's going to be covered by the base. But what I do want is I want to get enough under here so that I have a good attach point and a good strong bottom. So that's the reason what I'm doing is I went 2.5 inches from what will be from where the top of the base, the top of the stretcher will be down. And I've got a line 1/4 inch below that. That will be my shoulder or cheek, whichever it is. I always confuse them. But that's where the piece that's going to go in here will be notched at the top. You'll see. And I'm going to lay this out. Now, I did not do a 1/4 inch thing on the bottom here because it's irrelevant. It's not going to be seen. And this will be my mortise. Now, going to the top is the exact same thing, except that I'm going to drop down here 1/4 of an inch and I'm going to do that on all of them. Mortise, mortise. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with the top. And then we're ready. Then we're just about ready to cut the mortise. Then what we have to do is we have to find the center of this. Now I'm going to use a mortiser to do it. Now you can drill these and chisel them out, whatever you want to do. Could you use a biscuit in this? Yeah. It would probably do okay. If I was using this thick of wood, I'd do a double biscuit. Could you use a dowel? Yeah, you could use a dowel. I'd probably use a 1/2 inch dowel and get me several in there. What about a pocket screw? It would probably hold. But I like them. I think they do an excellent job, but I got to tell you, I just have a little bit of an issue personally with seeing a pocket screw in a piece of handcrafted furniture. Just me, I can't see that line. Just me. But I'll leave that decision to you. I'm going to mortise and tenon mine. Outside of a I don't even want to say outside of a dovetail. Peg mortise and tenon has been around just about as long, and it never failed. Never. And, you know, like I told you before, I've taken old antiques, and I mean old, apart, and they didn't have a drop of glue in them, and it was simply a peg, mortise, and tenon. And the joint got a little loose because over 300 or 400 years, the peg kind of dried out a lot and got a little loose. And I've actually just eased the peg out, pulled the joint apart, put a little bit of glue in it, put it back, dropped the peg back in, tightened it right up. So now I'm going to find my center here. 7/8. So 7/8, half of 7/8, 7/16. Is that right? I think so. Find that real quick. Now this is actually a little stronger, but I'm going to set it at that. I'm going to show you what I do so I can find my point. I'm actually pretty much on the money. Not exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to go just a little less. And you'll see what I'm going to tell you show you just in a minute. There we go. For me, I like that little gap in the middle, because when I set my mortise up, I can make sure that I hit it. And I mean, I could come in here and draw a line, but that's going to do just fine. All right, let me get a mortiser up here. Let's start chopping. All right, before I start chopping mortises, I'm going to take a minute and show you how to set one up. Now, this is a big Powermatic mortiser, and I fully understand most of you don't have one. It's okay. In the background over here, you'll see I also have a bench model. The only reason I'm not using that one is because it's got a 5/16 bit in it, and I want a 3/8, and that happens to already be in this one. Now, I will caution you something about mortisers. You get what you pay for. That's all I know how to tell you. I've had some of the cheaper ones, and I was not happy at all. The hold downs did not do very well. I just had issues. The hold downs didn't do. They would move left and right on the shaft. The pistons or the hydraulic arms weren't heavy enough to help me hold it up, and they can be quite frustrating if you don't have a good one. But irrespective of, while I'm here, I'm going to show you how to set up a mortiser. They're not hard. You got a drill, and you've got a drill bit. Let me get this out of the way. You have a drill bit that works inside a chisel. That's exactly what a mortiser is. And if you look at the drill bit, you're going to notice that's kind of a funny looking end on it. And what this is made to do, this is made to pull the chips up and exit them out through the chisel. There's the chisel. You make sure I prefer, make sure, I always like the exit port on the chisel in front. Now, the problem most people run into is setting up, and if you run your chisel all the way up into the bit, you're going to have an issue with the chisel. I mean, the chips can't get past the seal that the drill bit is causing inside of the chisel. So the drill bit actually has to set down a little bit to give it clearance to be able to pull the chips up. Here's a neat way of doing it. Take a quarter, put the quarter between the chisel and the plate that holds it. See if I can do it the other hand. Okay, that creates a space. Snug up the chisel. Then bring your drill bit up into the bottom of the chisel where you're not supposed to be. Tighten up the drill bit. Now, loosen the chisel. Remove the quarter, take the chisel all the way up. That'll give you correct spacing down here. Okay? Now comes another issue, and that issue is, and that issue is getting the chisel straight. Okay, if you look over here at this little one, this bar, what this is a hold in. And simply by reversing it, you can go, from a smaller piece to a taller piece. That's simple. But to set this drill bit straight, all you have to do is set this down in here. Make sure you're straight across with your fence, and bring your bit down. Then adjust up to it and make sure your bit is straight. On the big one, all we have to do is adjust, because it cranks, adjust it up and make sure it's straight. Now, if you find you're not getting as much clearance as you want, then all you have to do is go back and reset your chisel, this time use a nickel. Okay. I have my mortise laid out in my center line. Now remember, this is the one with the little dual ones. So I'm going to lock it down. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust it where I need. I'm going to be in your way because I got to look underneath here, and I'm going to see when my point is right dead in the center. All right, it's in place. Now I need to adjust my depth. And you've got a depth stop right here on almost all of them. Here's the way I do it. I want a 7/8 deep mortise. So all I did was went to the table saw and I cut me a 7/8 little piece of 1/4-inch plywood or scrap anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my bit down and I'm going to seat it in. In other words, there's a little point on the end of that bit and I'm going to push it right on down in there. Then I'm simply going to use the shim to set my 7/8 depth. And I'm set. And I'm locked down, so I'm going to start mortising these out. Might need to get a little tighter here. You know, you can buy air compressors pretty reasonable. You don't have to have a big, huge, massive one unless you're going to be using air tools and whatever. But just to have a little sure are nice. Now, me, I run them, then run back through them, and I take small bites. And the reason I do that is mortisers will still leave you a little bit of a crunchy bottom, and even though it will cut a square edge on the corners, it doesn't do it all the way down. The reason it doesn't is because, remember, that drill bit's down a little bit. So you got to take a little chisel and go in there and clean them up a little bit. Now, the other thing I do, and I did this intentionally because I want you to see it, is I run it the other way. I'm going to be sure this mortise is dead center. Because sometimes, despite your best efforts, they're not. And this one's not, because I want you to see it. Now, unless you're running, now in this case, what we've got is we've got a good sized mortise, but that's okay, because we've got 3/8, quarter, and a quarter, slightly over 3/8 because I offset it. Now, and by running it both sides, that just ensures we're dead center, so that when we go to cutting our our tenons, whatever, we can just cut them one right after the other, and take the same amount off of each side, and we have a good fit. Okay, I'm going to go through and cut the rest of these mortises. Then what's going to be our next step? Well, our next step now is going to be to put this together. Meaning what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut that 22.5 degree and make up these sides. I wanted to cut these first while I still have a square bottom. Because if I do this after I cut the 22.5, I have a sharp edge right here, and that sharp edge can get damaged, and it can, affect the appearance. So I want to get these done now.